Hi there everyone. In this video what I'd like to do is to help to bring a little bit of clarification to the widescreen option that you find available in some of the more recent versions of the HTC Sense camera app. From discussions I've had and also seen online, it's clear that there's often confusion or concern about using the widescreen option, and most of the worries seem to surround how it affects image resolution and especially how it affects the quality of the photos you take. So let's take a look at how it works and what changes take place, and hopefully by the end of the video you feel a bit more comfortable about deciding which mode's right for you personally. Okay, so let's pretend that this is our CMOS sensor inside the phone, which can produce photos with a resolution of 3264 by 2448 pixels. In other words, 8 megapixel images with an aspect ratio of 4:3. Right, so let's just get rid of this diagram for a second here and try to put that into some kind of perspective. And what I'll show you now is an 8 megapixel image that I've taken with the phone. As you can see, the picture looks just fine, but there is this pillaring or black banding effect down either side of the screen, and that's simply because the aspect ratio of the image being produced doesn't match the 16:9 aspect ratio of the phone's screen. One potential solution to that would be to stretch the image, but of course that would introduce distortion that nobody wants. So rather than stretching the image to fit, what HTC have done is include this widescreen option that crops the image to make it fit the entire display. And this is a simulated view of what I would have seen had I been using that mode at the time of taking the photograph. As you can see, the black banding is now gone and I've got a much larger view of the scene in front of me. So how does that one work? Well, to try and demonstrate that, let's switch back to our original view and take a look at things from a different angle. Now, remembering that the camera's sensor is capturing the photo at a much higher resolution than the phone's display, what HTC do is extend the view until the edge of the image reaches the sides of the screen, and this leaves these two areas that you can see here above and below the phone out of the view entirely, and it's these portions of the image that are simply discarded, or I suppose to be more accurate, they're ignored by the phone when taking the photo. One thing that often leads to confusion though is the fact that images taken in this mode only have a resolution of about 6 megapixels instead of the original 8, and it's not uncommon for people to think that it lowers the quality of the image as a result. So we'll address that point by going back to our CMOS sensor, and let's fade in the widescreen shot over the 6 megapixel area of the sensor that's been used for the capture. Now I'll draw a box around it and fade the shot back out again. Now we'll bring in the original 8 megapixel shot and see what we get. Right, well, as you can see, the image is larger, but what you can also see is that the portion of the image in the box is identical to the 16:9 image that we had there before. So in other words, the widescreen photo isn't compromised in terms of quality because the number of pixels that were being used to capture this central part of the image in standard mode are still being used in the widescreen mode too. The only difference that you could potentially see, I suppose, are alterations in exposure or colour tone, for example, which might be adjusted to compensate for the different view that you have. So based on that, in terms of advantages, the widescreen mode is very useful for people who are especially interested in viewing pictures on widescreen devices. That could be their TV, perhaps your computer monitor, or indeed a mobile phone for that matter, as most of them have this 16:9 aspect ratio. What about advantages for the 4:3 mode though? Well, obviously we know that we can capture a larger area in a single shot, which in some cases would avoid you having to take a step back to get something into view. But there is one other example that comes to mind which often gets overlooked until it's too late, and that example is printing. Clearly printing is going to vary greatly depending on the format of paper that you use, but I'm now going to fade in 2 white blocks which are an accurate representation, or an accurately scaled representation, of European A4 paper. And if I just superimpose the original 4:3 image on the left hand sheet, you can see that it very nearly fits the entire page. It doesn't quite reach the edge, so I'd need to crop a bit away from the top and bottom to make it fit, but otherwise it's not a bad fit at all. If, however, I now fade in the 16:9 version of the photo on the right, you can immediately see that even though I've scaled the image so that it reaches the sides of the paper, so much of the upper and lower parts were left out that I now have to crop away the sides of the photo as well and enlarge it even more to make it fit. At this stage, resolution potentially, and certainly creative freedom to frame the image in the way that I'd like starts to become a bit more of an issue. If I now switch to a view where the pages are covered, you start to get a general feel for how these two pictures might look in print. Try to remember, of course, that it's not about which one of the two you like more. The main point is that the image on the right could always be created by manually cropping the image on the left, which is the original 8 megapixel 4:3 photograph. So at the end of the day, when it comes to deciding whether or not to use the widescreen mode for your own photos, there really isn't a right or wrong answer. You just need to consider what your main use for the photos will be and base your decision on that.